Welcome back to the Green Yard. It is the end of November here in Phoenix, Arizona, Zone 9B, and it is still beautiful here in Phoenix. We've been having amazing weather. Our highs have been in the mid-70s. Our lows have been above 50 degrees, which is awesome for all of our tropical trees that we have here in the food forest part of the Green Yard. That is where I am here. This is our food forest part of the Green Yard, where we have all of our fruiting and flowering tropical trees, including around me. I have our beautiful soursop tree, which I did an update on back a couple months ago. Got our loquat tree here that's starting to flower out a little bit. Michaelia alba is just underneath the camera. Got a giant papaya behind me. Our Java de Cabo, which I also did an update video on recently. Cherry, mango, jacote, jackfruit, Paul avocado, and so many more are over here in the food forest part of the Green Yard. But the reason we're here today is for our beautiful Santol tree, this cotton fruit tree here. It has been 15 months, almost exactly, since we planted our Santol tree here in the food forest part of the Green Yard. So this is another edition of our How's It Growing episode. So how has it been growing? It has been 15 months since we put our Santol tree in the ground. Let's go ahead and talk about what it's been like growing this Santol tree in the last 15 months. Here we go. Beautiful monstera here. I'll put this in the ground last spring. It's been pushing out new leaves, and you can actually see some aerial roots here at the bottom. Hopefully the plan is that it attaches itself to this ancient mulberry tree here and starts growing up the mulberry tree. So this is our Santol tree. It's actually been doing really well. I'm a little shocked by how well it's been doing. This is all brand new growth that it's been putting out in the last week or so. Really started to fill out is what it's been working on this year. One of the biggest things that I've noticed besides it filling out is that it did get a little sunburn this summer. Even though it does get that afternoon shade, it was getting some afternoon sun for maybe like 30 minutes, and it does have those sunburned leaves. But as soon as we started cooling off, just like our other fruiting and flowering tropical trees, it started pushing out that new growth right away and really starting to branch out. You can see here we have one, two, kind of three main branches that we have going on, but one of the cool things is that it's also putting out new branches. Like this one's going to be a new branch that comes out. Same with up here, we're seeing some more branching off happening on a regular basis, which is really amazing to see. So definitely a cool tree that's starting to do really well here in the Phoenix area, or at least in the food forest part of the Green Yard. One of the biggest things that I've noticed is that the trunk is still super tiny. It is bigger than when I planted it, but the trunk itself really hasn't grown in any girth at all. Doesn't mean that the tree is doing bad or anything else. It just means that it may not necessarily be able to support itself if I didn't have these ties on here. I don't have it in me to trim it back right now, but I am seeing that, you know, if I didn't have this tie on here, it might flop over a little bit. So the tree itself is a little floppy. I'm hoping it gains that strength soon. So our Santol trees here in Phoenix, what I've noticed is that they do okay in our summer. We kind of had our extreme heat last summer, so this one struggled a little bit and did get sunburn. It does get afternoon shade all summer long, and that is something that it definitely needs, is that afternoon shade. If it did not have afternoon shade, I have a feeling it would have very quickly burned up and dried out and died. So definitely get that afternoon shade. We're fortunate enough where we have our giant mulberry tree that provides most of that afternoon shade. We also have our passion fruit vine that's growing along this kind of homemade trellis here. And then I'm actually finding that our loquat here is also providing some afternoon shade. You can see it definitely got burnt up this summer because it was getting that full sun during the afternoon. So it has started to put off some new branches and some new growth that look really, really healthy, just like our Santol tree and the rest of our trees here in the food forest part of the green yard. Cold. Um, Last year I uncovered it a little early, a little prematurely, and it did get, low 40s for a temperature a couple nights in a row. Now, luckily, the highs were, starting to get into the 80s, so it wasn't too bad. High 70s in the spring. It only saw those temperatures for maybe an hour at night, but it did survive those temperatures, which was kind of cool to see, push the limits a little bit. I didn't mean to do that, but I took off the coverings both for our soursop and our Santol tree. They were covered together and I took them both off. Soursop totally defoliated, it lost all of its leaves, but then it just immediately started pushing out that new growth. So almost like it needed to defoliate to push out that new growth. Santol tree just kind of stayed the same and just hung out. But it is doing really, really well, branching out, looking amazing. It's been 15 months, so it's been a long time since we, had this tree put in the ground, and it is looking good. This year, I am going to cover it again. This is one of those trees where I'm pretty much always going to cover it in the winter, give it that cold protection. Let's talk about some of our amendments and what I've been doing to the soil, as well as what I've been doing to kind of support this tree in its growth. Here we go. So in terms of amendments, things like that I've been doing for our Santol tree, very similar to our other fruiting and flowering tropical trees. I know we have, our soursop tree right behind, our Michaelia alba here. So really very similar in terms of what we do. One of the biggest things, and actually what I've spread lately, is new mulch. So mulch has been huge for what I believe is the success and the increased growth of this Santol tree. One of the reasons why, in my opinion, is that it helps to retain that moisture. So typically I only water once a week in the summer, once every 2 weeks, or once a month in the winter, depending on the temperatures that we're at. Right now, all of our trees are getting water once every 2 weeks, and that mulch is a huge factor of that, helping to retain that moisture, keep that moisture in there. One of the other really amazing things that our mulch does, besides just keep that moisture in, is it helps to break down and change our soil. So it no longer is that clay soil, instead it is more of that organically rich, that darker soil. It actually adds organic material back into the soil, which helps retain that moisture as well, which is definitely something that we're looking for. With our Santol tree, just like with most of our fruiting, flowering tropical fruit trees, they require a lower soil pH. So that is something that I do with our Santol tree as well. I add in that agricultural sulfur to lower that soil pH. So any nutrients that are in the soil or that I add to the soil, it can take up and actually use. Part of the reason I think that it is branching out so much is because it's able to take up those nutrients that are in the soil and that I'm adding. Speaking of adding those nutrients, one of the other key things that I've been doing with our Santol tree is giving it fish emulsion once a month. I actually gave it twice a month in July, I believe, during the really hot time. Remember, our trees, just like us, they have to eat, and I've been seeing a lot of extra growth ever since I started doing regular fish emulsion once a month for our fruiting and flowering trees. Here, it's been a little bit over a year, actually right around that 15-month mark. So right around the time that I planted this tree is when I started adding in that fish emulsion once a month as well. So I'm excited for this Santol tree. I don't know of anyone yet that has had fruit or flower here in the Phoenix area. There's always a first time for everything, so maybe this beautiful Santol tree will be the first time for that. In the meantime, though, I'm going to keep protecting it from our cold temperatures, pretty much anything below 50 degrees. I'm going to protect it from, cover it, add in some additional heat source as well with those C9 Christmas light bulbs, and then of course give it that afternoon shade pretty much anytime after 10 o'clock in the summer as well. This time of year, everything is looking amazing. This is the best time of year that I found for our trees. They're all putting out new growth, and they're really loving our cooler temperatures here in Phoenix after our really hot summer. If you have any questions about our Santol tree, please feel free to comment below, or any questions about our other fruiting and flowering trees. If you would like to see an episode or a video on any of our other trees, feel free to comment below as well. Make sure that if you want to see more great green content that you subscribe, hit that subscribe button. And of course, as always, live green, plant lots, and have fun. We'll see you next time.